Welcome to the introductory or initial presentation for the World Geography, World Regional Geography, Geography 102. In this one, we're going to be trying something a little different because for one thing, the online format doesn't allow the old style map quiz. And secondly, is I really don't like the old style map quiz. So we'll get into that in a second. But if you notice, there's not a regular text. World Geography text, there's a ton of them out there. They're nice and big and they're heavy. They're really great for slapping B-52s down that are crawling on the floor. And they're stunningly expensive. The average price is between $90 and like $300 for an introductory text, which is totally insane. And to be honest, I don't know that anyone ever reads them. I find them incredibly difficult to even struggle through when I'm a geographer. So I'm not sure what their purpose is, to be really honest, but I'm sure they generate a lot of revenue for someone. I don't see any particular value in that. On the other hand, there's a book by this guy named Marshall that he wrote about 6-7 years ago. Was a New York Times bestseller. It's very, very readable. It's very, very good. It's very sophisticated, but it's not hard to get through. This is his Prisoner's Geography. And what he's doing is actually looking at the function of geography. The problem with traditional world regional geography courses and the course in general and the text is they're actually based on stuff that was going on 100, 200 years ago in Europe and the United States when you had these huge colonial powers developing. And so there was this, you were managing, if you're the British, you're managing an empire that surrounds the globe. The sun never set on the British Empire. And one of the huge demands then you had in your educational system was that you had to train folks that were going to go out and work in these colonial empires. So therefore, people had to have a real good understanding of the world around them. They had to know where things were, and this had to be in their heads because there wasn't any digital. There was no online back then. And so world regional geography courses actually in their modern version started in the 19th century as part of the colonial control from Europe and the United States of the rest of the planet. And so geography courses, and that's why world regional geography was, and in most cases, in most universities still is, a required course. In the same way, if you go to a lot of elite high schools, they still require Latin. I have no idea why, but they do, because that was another part of this package that you had if you were a sort of colonial officer, I don't know what you want to call them, that's going to go out to somewhere else in the world. You had to understand where every place else in the world was. You had to have it right in your head so you could call it up on a moment's notice, because you couldn't, otherwise you had to lug like an atlas or something around. So it's in that context that the courses were developed. And therefore, what you had to remember was not only where the country of France is, but also you had to remember like the 10 top things about that country and what about it, da, 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 da. And so it's in that context that traditional world geography courses were developed. And this is, I hate to say it, this is still what you see, for example, in grade school and high school if you had to take a geography class. Having said that, if you're in the European educational system, especially in primary or secondary education, they still teach exactly this class. In part because in Europe, as in Asia and most of the rest of the world, there's a very strong realization you really do have to know where you are on the rest of the planet, because guess what? It's all tied in together. And you can't just wait for the luxury of, Googling, going on Google Maps and figuring out where it is. You got to know so that you can make sense of what's going on around you. So it's in that context that on one hand, geography classes are really almost like a dinosaur in the sense that they reflect something that was. On the other hand, if you think about COVID in this last year or so, knowing geography is probably even more obviously critical than it was in, the year before that, in 2019, for example. The need to know it has never changed, but I think the awareness maybe for especially Americans who tend to be absolutely abysmally ignorant of geography. A huge part of the American population can't even show you on a map where their state is, much less where their country is. I think it's Jimmy Kimmel, one of the other nighttime hosts, frequently does this, where he actually goes and asks people where something is, and stunningly embarrassing. Their cluelessness. And it's something that Europeans and Asians constantly mention if I'm dealing with my Asian colleagues, for example. They find it mind-blowing that one of the great superpowers on the planet has no clue where they even exist, much less where other countries are. They can't fathom how you can even function with that level of, dumbness, for lack of any better word for it. So it's in that context that this course is, a traditional class. I think Marshall's book is a much better example of what geography can be when it's actually seen to serve a function. So when you're looking at the Marshall's book, read it through in chunks. Don't try to do a couple of pages. Give yourself the time to actually go through, a chapter, one of these maps that he's talking about, because he's going to understand, he's going to explain the relationships both of history and also the places in a particular area that makes sense of some current issue that we're dealing with in the 21st century, all of which are based in the past, all of which are based in geography. I would argue that 90% of the people that are in the process of trying to kill each other, get rid of each other in 2021 are based entirely in their experience of geography and their perception of their place in geography. Terrifying stat, by the way, I might point out. So in that context, that's the class. We're looking at the role of basically people around the planet, their identity of who they are, the relationship that people have with the physical environment, how they either use that physical environment, or in the case of the United States, you ignore that physical environment, the consequences of that, global warming being an example. So in that context, that's how the class is structured. And so we'll segue here into the part that's really critical for you guys, which is grading. Okay, gradings, part of this is going to be my normal. In all of my classes, I use what I call critical thinking exercises. These basically are very straightforward. I actually got a template further down the syllabus, which you can go fish up, which actually says how to do a critical thinking exercise in terms of what I expect from it. For you guys, and especially in this class, since it's regional, we're going over different parts of the world. So we start with Europe, then we go with basically what you might call Eastern Europe, Russia, then Middle East or actually West Asia, and these. So we're going through these different regions. As we're going through them, at different points they're going to have to do a critical thinking exercise, maybe covering Europe and say the Eastern Europe. In that context, when we're going through that stuff, and when you're looking at Marshall's, for example, or the videos that we're showing, pay attention to something that you either find interesting or something that you might find useful either for your career, your major, or just personal of interest, or maybe people you've been exposed to, part of your life experience. And then what you want to do is go into more depth than we've covered in class and in the reading, in the sense of the course material, and that's your critical thinking exercise. So the critical thinking exercises, how to do them is structured by me. That's the template that you've got. What you choose to do it on is your choice. It's especially in this class, it's pretty wide open. My suggestion would be, if you don't have anything that's particularly in your major that's related to it, would be some sort of really current issue that's a big deal in that area that you find of interest, or you've seen, for example, show up in whatever newsfeed service you look at, and actually investigating that into more detail. So critical thinking exercises, especially for this class, to me are would be almost not a problem finding something to write about, and taking a deeper look into, and that's your critical thinking exercise. That's the majority of your grade in this class. The other big part of the grade is the presentation blog. And this basically, for many of you, that might just be an expansion of one of your critical thinking papers. And what you want to do is basically, in this case, is build a presentation PowerPoint slide, if you want to, and or a blog, like a blog post you put on a website, that would actually go into even more detail, explaining a particular issue and then what you found out about it and your analysis of it. So think of it as like a giant version of a critical thinking exercise. Again, I would suggest for both of these, tying it into your major or your potential career, or maybe where you plan to locate, for example, or places you'd like to live, or places you're familiar with by virtue of your relatives or something like that, would be like a no-brainer in terms of coming up with those. So as we're going on, if you can think of a region, or if you can think of an issue, not sure to tie a region, by all means contact me in advance. In fact, I'd request that you would anyways, just to make sure. But you get to choose what it is you want to actually cover. I don't want to give you a topic. I want you guys to write a paper on X. The third part is something I've just been fishing up. These are map tests. Again, the fact that Americans can't even identify places on a map, I'm a geographer, and as an archaeologist originally, I'm fascinated with cartography, and it's a big part of our Pololo project is actually the making of maps. In fact, I work with Google Earth in the making of maps. So to me, people that are clueless about a map, I'm sort of like, how? I have a hard time sort of grasping that. I just fished out just a little while ago. I was trying to find an alternative to the old style map quizzes that I usually use, which are just paper ones, you just put the stuff on them. I just found this place called Cetera.com. I'm still sketching out exactly how we're going to do this. But they have really cute, well, actually very clever timed regional maps. Now you still have in the canvas, you actually have a set of maps with the locations on them, or I should say listed on them, that originally would have been for the hard copy map quizzes we would do in class. I'm going to port these over, or I'm going to have you shift these over to the Cetera site, or have you do the Cetera ones instead. I still have to work out how we're going to do the giving you credit for them. I think I'm just going to have you do them and then tell me what your score is, since they're actually timed and they're sort of fun. They've got a bunch that are actually pretty cute, but we won't do the cartoon ones. We'll do the regular ones. So don't worry about that. That still will be a part of the grade, but I'll give you the links to that by Monday or Tuesday, by the time the class semester starts up. I like what I saw. I'm just trying to figure out how we can actually do that to make it easy for you and also sort of entertaining. I'm sort of thinking in terms of contest, who gets best score. So anyways, the next part of the reaction papers, there's a number of videos in this class. One thing about World Original Geography is, boy, it's easy to find videos. A lot of them are very short and pretty surreal, to be honest. And those will be the basis of your reaction papers. If you'll notice when you get to the Canvas site, you'll see a bunch of videos listed. With the videos, there'll be a question or two attached to it in terms of things that I want you to watch when you're watching the video, or look for when you're watching the video. And that's going to be what you do your reaction papers on. I want you to do your reaction paper on answering the questions that I've posed for when you watch the videos. Now, especially in this class, since we're going through different parts of the world, you've got to watch the videos when it's that part of the semester. It doesn't, there's a really scary one about Russian national, right-wing uber nationalism. It doesn't do any good to watch that at the end of the semester. So don't take these as, oh, I just got to do it before when the semester's out. You've got to do them when we're covering that material. It doesn't make, if you watch that video when we're talking about Russia, and if you read Marshall's section on Russia, it will scare the absolute crap out of you. If you watch it later, it'll just be like, okay, why did I watch that? So the videos are intended to be watched in the context of the material we're covering. For no other reason, it tends to generate, some of these videos will generate an enormous amount of discussion because they are very thought-provoking, to put it mildly. So that's the reaction papers. So you get graded on doing them. You do not get graded on the content or how long the answer is. You get graded on doing them. But I'm going to ding you on attendance if I get this stuff at the end of the semester. So if you didn't do them when you were supposed to, I'm not going to be a happy camper, and you'll pay the price for that. We are doing Zoom sessions for the first 2 weeks. I'm waiting to see how the university sorts this out in terms of what they want to do beyond that. My personal opinion, just between us, since I'm a geographer, and one of the things we look at in geography is, for example, disease vectors. It's geographers that have been mapping the move of COVID-19 and the variants around the planet. That's something that we do. I don't personally, that's not my kuleana, but it is a geography thing. As I would say that we're probably looking at April before classes actually can comfortably be back in place and people can be back on campus without having to stress out about, should I be in some sort of, isolation tank or something like that. So I would figure, being a pessimist and being a geographer and believing in Murphy, I would say figure late March, early April, when we're actually comfortable in a classroom. So up to then, figure that we'll be doing Zoom. You will have the option of being in class, say by the third week, if you really have to be physically in a classroom, I can do it there. I've done it before. But at least initially we're going to do Zoom because I want to wait and see how this all sorts out before we put ourselves at risk for, relatively low reward for the amount of risk being put into it when you think about it. So here's the schedule. If you look at the schedule, you notice pretty easily this you also see this in Canvas. What we've got is we're covering different areas. Not surprising in this class, once after we go to the basic concepts, it's different parts of the world on these different regions because, it's a regional geography class. And then there's the different parts of Marshall and the different things you're supposed to do as part of that. Like I said, the map quizzes, that's the Cetera thing was fun. The map quizzes will probably be in Cetera. I'm just still trying to figure out how to give you guys credit or get you guys to show me that you did them. So I'll have to go investigate that a little more. But that's going to definitely be what we're going to use. I thought that was sort of fun. So that's your map part of that. You can see all the work that you've got to do. The presentation blog is due at the end of the semester. If you notice one of the side effects, I forgot to mention this. One of the side effects, of course, is because we're doing the critical thinking and you got the presentation, you do not have tests in this class. Well, you got the map quizzes, but you know, those are just quizzes. You do not have a midterm and you don't have a final. So think of that as that's the advantage of having to spend the extra mental effort doing the critical thinking papers, is you don't have to sit there and stress out with the idea of, you know, a timed midterm or a final, which, trust me, in a class like regional geography can be a real nightmare. If you ever want to do this, go and see if you can, there's like AP geography, you know, classes online for free. Look at their map quizzes, or look at their test and a semester test. And, you know, your eyes can smoke trying to figure that stuff out. So I think the semester is really straightforward. It's obviously you know, especially in this day and age, it's an obviously critical class. I do think everyone should have to take it for entirely different reasons than maybe 150 years ago. But I think especially in this day and age, you know, understanding where you are, your place in the world and those around you and how other people see the world differently than you do is a critical part of surviving in the 21st century. And so I think, you know, we're going to cover that a lot. What we look at in each region is both the physical aspects of that place, a little bit of the history, but then a lot of what the contemporary issues are. If you want to keep up on, you know, right at the beginning, what you might want to do initially, since we're going to be getting to Europe initially, because you're going to hear about it, would be actually Google this whole issue of the Brexit, of the British leaving the European Union, and the fallout that's sort of like going like a domino effect as that takes place. That's sort of a classic example of an issue as we speak, literally as of, you know, January 28th, 2021. There's a ton more of those. That's just one that comes pops that up in my head. So I think you'll find this class interesting. It's certainly topical. It's certainly relevant. It's a very useful class. It's not just a sort of an exercise in futility. And if we get the Cetera thing going, I think you'll find it sort of fun. Because among other things, with the Cetera, come to think of it, you could actually have your friends that aren't in the class take it and see who gets better scores in the quizzes. You know, I don't know sure why you'd want to do that, but you know, what the hell, why not? So with that, I'll see you on, let me check. Class is technically Tuesday and Thursday at 1 o'clock. So I'll see you Tuesday at 1 o'clock in a Zoom session that I'll send you the invites to.